Hello everyone. In this lesson, we'll create our first Angular application. So let's get started. At the beginning, let's introduce you to one of the resources that I frequently use for Angular development, and I think it will be very beneficial for you as well. So we are first going to this angular.io website, which gives tutorial and other resources for Angular development. So let's get started. So from this website, if you click on the get started, it will talk about the prerequisite JavaScript, HTML and CSS, which we covered. And it also says that you should have a little bit of knowledge of TypeScript. And we'll talk about that as we go through our lessons. So the next thing is we need Node.js and npm package manager. So let's get started with the installation and then we'll talk about those. So for this, you will go to the nodejs.org website from here. And then once you go to the Node.js website, you will click on the download. And depending on your operating system, you will select the version that you want to install. I'll recommend you to choose LTS, which is the stable version, instead of using the current. So I'll choose Windows here, and it will give me the Windows version. So while it is being downloaded, let's talk a little bit about Node.js. So Node.js is an open source JavaScript runtime environment that executes JavaScript code outside of a web browser. So typically we are used to write JavaScript, as we saw in our previous lesson as well, as part of a website, and then it's running on web browser. But Node.js, on the other hand, lets the developer use JavaScript to write command line tools and for server-side scripting and running a server, basically, all those kind of functionalities. We don't need to know Node.js in any details for the purpose of learning Angular development, as this is just one of our prerequisite. But it's better to just know what it is. So now that Node.js is installed, I'll go there and I'll install that. So once we install Node.js, which we can start now, I'm accepting the licensing agreement and I'm selecting a folder where to install Node.js, and I'm going ahead with the installation. So as you can see, as part of the Node.js, you are getting the Node.js runtime and the npm package manager, which is another requirement for Angular development. the Angular, and Angular comes with something called Angular CLI or command line interface, and an Angular application depends on feature and functionality provided by the libraries that are part of NPM, that are available as NPM packages. So that's why we'll need the NPM package manager. It's a good thing that as part of the Node.js, we are also getting NPM package manager, so we don't need to separately set up it. So now I will go ahead. So while this installation is going on, let's talk a little bit about Angular. So when you hear about Angular, you will sometimes hear the terminology AngularJS, and sometimes you will hear just Angular. So what is the difference? So Angular is a TypeScript based open source web application framework, and it is led by the Angular team at Google. And so the first version of Angular was AngularJS, and which was JavaScript based, whereas Angular 2 and anything after that up to the current version, which is version 9, they are TypeScript based. So that's why when somebody say AngularJS, they are referring to the first version, and then when somebody says just Angular, they are referring to Angular 2 and any of the subsequent version which are TypeScript based. And like, it is good to know that it is led by a open source. It is developed by an open source as a open source technology, and it is led by the team at Google. So there will be support around, like, development support around Angular moving forward, because it's good to have a community who are continuously developing more feature so that it doesn't get outdated. Now, as I mentioned that Angular is TypeScript based. What is TypeScript? TypeScript is another open source programming language, and it is, on the other hand, developed and maintained by Microsoft. So what is the difference between TypeScript and JavaScript? As we saw in JavaScript, it's like loosely typed in one of our previous example, that whether a variable is number or string, this is not really clear. It depends on kind of the value of it. Whereas in TypeScript, you can use more strong type similar to Java. We will see examples of TypeScript as we learn our Angular development, but it is good to know at a high level. So TypeScript, when we write something in TypeScript, it actually transcompiles to JavaScript. What is transcompile? Transcompile is actually when one source code get compiled to another source code. So when we are writing something in TypeScript, it gets compiled to JavaScript, and that eventually gets run on the browser. That's why the process is called transcompile. And the syntax for TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. What that means is that it has the TypeScript specific syntax, but any JavaScript specific syntax that you already know of, that will also work as part of TypeScript. Okay, now that our node installation is completed, what we can do is we can open our command line. So you can actually type here for CMD to get the command prompt, but there is another way to open command prompt, which is you can go to a particular folder where you will be doing your development, and you can actually open the command prompt at that place by clicking on this address bar and typing CMD there, so that the command prompt will open at that location. So now if you do anything like create a directory or some other command, it will take effect in that folder. So Now that we have Node.js installed, we can make sure that Node.js was successfully installed by writing node-v command, and it will give us the version of the Node.js that's running. And then, as I have mentioned, that the npm package manager was also installed as part of this. So to make sure that as npm was installed successfully, we have to type npm -v, and it will give us the version number of the npm. So the next thing we're going to install is the Angular CLI. Angular CLI is a command line interface that will give us some functionality that we'll be able to do some tasks from this command line tool, and it will basically help us to develop faster, and you will see examples of that. But for now, we'll install Angular command line interface or Angular CLI from here. You can go ahead and check that command from the Angular IO website, but I will type it here: npm install -g add angular/CLI. So when you are typing this command, either copy it from the Angular IO website, this is provided here, or if you're typing it manually, make sure that you are typing it with the correct spelling. So I'll go ahead and install Angular CLI. So Angular CLI is installed. Now we can create a workspace and our initial application. So for this, you should be in the folder where you want your application to be. That can be in any folder in your computer, but you can, if you open the command line from here, you should you can go cd, then type the directory name to go to that folder, or if you're in a particular folder and if you want to go to the previous directory, you need to type cd ... to go to the previous folder. In our case, we want to create it in this +2 folder, and I have already shown you that you can directly come to this folder in your command line by going to that folder from File Explorer and then typing cmd in the address bar. So once you are there, and now you have Node.js installed and npm installed, and we have also installed the Angular command line interface. So now we can create our first Angular application, and the command for that is ng new, and then you need to provide a name for the application. So we're going to call this my photo application. And with that, if I press enter, Angular will now create the application. So it will ask you for some options. For example, would you like to add Angular routing? So we'll look at details of Angular routing. What Angular routing allows you to is actually when you are typing something in your address bar, the Angular routing will make sure that you are going to the right component for that particular URL. But yes, we are going to use Angular routing. So I will press Y. Next, it is giving us multiple options for the styling. We can use CSS or SCSS and some of these other options. We're going ahead with the default option, CSS. Now it's going to create my application and all the required file. Some of those will review during the development, but we will not have to go through all of them and see what is there. That's the benefit of Angular command line interface, is that it creates a lot of the boilerplate work that you frequently needs to do at the beginning of an application development. So while it is creating those files, we can actually go and see here that within that class 2 folder, it created this my photo application, and inside that my photo application is creating all the necessary for app files for the fast Angular application. It's in setting up all the node modules, it's setting up the source, and then package.json is our dependencies, but it's declaring all those things. So it actually finished setting up our application. So now that our application is created, we want to run this application. So for running this application, we have to go inside that folder. So we can type here my photo application, or you can type couple of character and then press tab and it will complete it for you, and then you can go inside that folder. So now that you are inside that folder, you can actually run that application. So for running the application, you can just type ng serve and press enter, and it will run that application. But if you want to actually run the application as well as open it in browser, then you can pass this additional command, ng serve -- open. What it will do is it will go ahead, it will do all the compiling necessary, and then run the application, and then at the end it will also open the application. So as I said, it finished creating the application and now it's open it, and it's by default running in port number 4200. So localhost / 4200. Here is our application, and it's by default came up with this default page, and then it's also giving us some instruction for going forward and generating component, but we will look at those later. But we have our fast Angular application running here. Now, as long as this command line is open, that application will keep running. If we want to close the application, we can either close this command line, or we can press here Control and C together. So Control plus C, and it will ask us to terminate the job. And if we say yes, it will close the application. And when the application is closed, if we go back and if we refresh here, you will see that the application is not running anymore. We can go to the folder and we can follow the same approach to start it again, but we have our fast application created. Thank you.